Hey there everybody, my name is Brandon. This here is my channel of sharing with you everything that I've got going on painting wise here in my studio and gallery. So this particular video, we're going to have a look at a process that I did recently here on some dog portrait pet commissions. So this series here, there's two greyhounds there and a golden retriever there in the middle. I was commissioned to do these pieces here for a friend of mine, so we're going to have a look at how I get that done. Let's go. You know, I've only been on this painting journey now for almost 3 years, and I would say at this point in the game for me, still my most common commissioned request from anyone is to paint their dog for them, a pet portrait. I've had numerous requests over the past year or two to paint dog portraits for folks, and I've gotten fairly comfortable with it. I mean, wildlife and landscapes is what I like to paint the most, so these guys aren't too far from the wildlife thing. And what I normally start with here is some source photos, and I sort through these and try to find the best poses that I can out of them. That I send proposals through email here, and I'm just using, this is a art sketchbook on the computer that I basically pull in the photos and create a few proposals for them. In this case here, we were going to go with just a faded color background, keeping it kind of neutral because of the colors in their house. When they hang these on the walls, it's not anything that's going to clash too bad. And so I would send a few emails back and forth to say, okay, what do you think about these pictures, and how do you like this, and get some feedback from them. And ultimately we would arrive at a final image that was agreed upon to be painted. So again, in this instance, I had sent a few earlier proposals, and they decided to go with these images that were just basically a face and chest of the dog with kind of a gray background fade of almost a white to a light gray. The first thing I do on any of these canvases is try to get my backgrounds prepared. So in this case, it was going to be using some white and gray gesso to prime these canvases with and create my backgrounds. So I basically just worked in a gray gesso along these edges, and then faded and blended that into a white for the center, or close to the center anyway, to create the backgrounds that I wanted for these particular dogs. We wanted something that, again, was kind of neutral in color, wasn't going to clash a lot with the decor of the house and things they had going on, but also was going to allow a good contrast for these particular dogs. And they are different colored dogs, so you had to kind of keep that in mind of what's going to allow the images of the dogs themselves to pop when it's painted across this background. So trying to come up with some colors that the lighter golden colorations of that golden retriever and then the colors of these two greyhounds would still look good against. And ultimately, after looking at a few different images, this is what we decided to go with. So I'm using museum wrapped style gallery canvases here with a pretty thick frame on them. That way these images can be hung without a frame if you want, or you can even stand them up on a surface. But again, you'll see me painting along the edges here to create the initial canvas backgrounds that I'll be starting with. Then my next step in my process is creating a pencil sketch on here. So you'll see me using my reference photo here, using a pencil to sketch out the image. I'm trying to get the proportions right and the face right, trying to, you know, pencil in some of the darker areas. This just allows me to put the colors where they're supposed to go once I start putting the paint on the canvas. My next move then is to block in all of these colors. And I start usually with the darkest tones and values of what I feel is going to be the shaded areas and the darker areas, and lay all that in first. So I'm starting here with this golden retriever. I felt like the images I was using here, I was kind of piecemealing about 2 or 3 images together for this particular dog, so I knew it would be the most challenging for me. The other 2 greyhounds, I had a pretty good, solid reference photo to paint off of. This particular dog, I was kind of using 2 or 3 different ones to try to get the color right, try to get the facial structure right, and the pose that we wanted the dog in correct. And so I started with this one to try to get the most difficult out of the way, I guess you could say, for me. And you'll see me now just using angled brushes and wash brushes to block in all the darker colors. So dark browns mostly for the body, neck area, and in some of the ears, lightening up the browns a little bit for the face just so I can get the proportions and the structure right. Darker reds there for the tongue and some for the nose. Really just a dark black with a little bit of brown in it for the eyes to start out with. And this process is just a matter of getting all of my dark colors in place and then going back and shading to try to get the right look. So I've moved now into smaller angled brushes, and I'm starting to try to get the coloration right and work the shades properly on this face. And now you'll notice that I go back and forth about 2 or 3 different times on this particular dog, trying to get the colorations right, trying to get the look right that I'm going for, trying to match those source photos the best I can. I really moved to the eyes here first just because I felt like that would be something that I didn't have to do more than 1 or 2 times to get to look right. So I went ahead and got those done, taken care of. Moved a little bit here to the tongue and the nose just to sharpen things up there. But it was the longer hair and fur texture and the coloration that I knew was going to give me the most fits, so to speak, on this particular dog that I was going to have to work to get the way I wanted it. So now's when you're going to see me playing around with a couple of different passes of colors and shading to try to get this thing to look right. And my process is the same really with any of these animals that I do, any kind of wildlife or these dogs. Start with my darker tones, and then I try to shade back in the lighter areas, and then just work back and forth until I get it the way I want it. The areas that obviously catch the most light on this dog's face, I try to put in the brighter highlights on and shade things out. And then, take a step back and look at it and then adjust what I think that I need to adjust. And so you're going to see me now here as I work into the body, start to bring in a couple of different passes of color changes here, trying to get the look right. The source photos I was using again, and one of them was under particularly warm light, so it brought out a lot more reds and orange tones in the dog's fur. And the others, the dog was a little bit more of that golden color, a lot less red in it. So I'm really having to kind of work back and forth with some of those tones and shades to try to figure out the ultimate end result that I'm looking for. And again, it was a little bit of a challenge with this particular dog. It's just a matter of playing around with these colors until I arrive at a point that I'm happy with. And so here I go now with another pass, lightening things up a good bit, trying to create some of that longer hair and fur texture on that body and along these ears. I felt that ultimately if I could get the fur and the hair on the body here looking the way I wanted, that I would be able to carry those colors then up onto the face. So I start to spend a little more time down here trying to get this figured out, get this hair looking the way that I want it to look. You've still got some areas where it's shadowed here where the light's not catching it in between a lot of this hair and fur, and it's a little bit wavy in some places, a little curly in others, and a little bit flat and straight in others. So that's where the challenge was for me, was just trying to get all of that hair texture to look right, try to get the color to look right. And so this particular dog took me the longest of the 3, just because I knew I was going to have to go back and forth here multiple passes to get the things right. Now I've moved to a liner brush to try to start adding in actual individual hair details. And then as another pass here on my nose, I just stare at things for a while and decide I want to change things a little bit. Here I am adjusting color yet again for about the third time now with a color adjustment, using a wash brush to kind of blend. Then I move back into my liner brush again to try to put in individual hair details. And it was about the fourth pass that I think of a color adjustment that I was ultimately fairly happy with the way it looked. And again, that was just a matter of me looking at the source photos that I was sent. The majority of the source photos, this dog had a golden coloration that didn't have nearly as much red in it. So I ultimately went with that as my color. And then just a matter of shading things out to get this dog's face to look the way I wanted it to look. We wanted that happy face there with the tongue out, so there was my finished product of the Golden Retriever. And now it's just a matter of repeating the process on these Greyhounds. My camera's slightly out of focus for some crazy reason here at the beginning. It'll shift here in just a matter of seconds. So then you can see what I'm actually doing here, but it's blocking in my darker tones again. And starting with the darkest colors in the areas that I'm going to be putting them. So now that everything's in focus, you can see what I've got going on here on this Greyhound, putting in the blacks, the browns, along the eyes, the edges of the ears, the nose, shading things out in the darker areas. With this being a shorter haired dog that I had a really good source photo of, I felt pretty good about the colors that I was using here and getting this dog to look the way I wanted it to look based on the photo that I had. So this Greyhound and the other one that I'm going to do, I felt pretty confident going in. I'd done enough dogs. Once I have a good reference photo like that I can get them looking at least to the point where I'm happy with it, and then it's just hoping that these images will be instantly recognizable to the owners of the dog. And ultimately with a pet portrait, that instant ultimately with a pet portrait, it's that moment of being able to instantly recognize the dog as your dog is what I'm trying to achieve. And it helps when you have really good source photos like this, because if it's a photo that they have taken of their dog, chances are they have looked at this photo numerous times prior to me painting it. So it's an image that they already have that's very relevant in their mind. It's a picture they've looked at of their dog numerous times. And so when I paint that exact image, the painting then will be instantly recognizable to them because it's of a photo that they've already got locked into their brain, that they've looked at, countless times probably before I've even seen it. So that's just another thing that helps me when I have a really good source photo that they say, yes, I want this particular picture painted. I can go in with a lot more confidence knowing that, hey, if I can pull off a painting that very closely resembles what I'm looking at in that photo, then when they see this painting for the first time, it's going to be instantly recognizable to them, just because that image is already in their mind. And these Greyhounds, being a short-haired dog here that I'm dealing with, I don't have to deal with as much fur texture. I just have to put in individual details with a liner brush and then adjust my colors, and I'm pretty much good to go. So there is my finished product of the first Greyhound. And now it's just a matter of one more time, the third dog here, another Greyhound. A little bit different deal here just because we were going with a full open mouth on this particular dog. It was just a feature that they wanted captured. They felt like that was very much the personality of this particular dog, that, it's very common to see a big happy face on this one with the mouth open. So we wanted to capture that here in this painting. And you'll see me again, I start out with my darker colors. I'm working in these dark tones and shades. And then I move to the areas that things are a little bit lighter, but still it's the darker values of it that I put in place first. And then I come back and start working in my layers of shading and highlighting. And this particular Greyhound was one of the brindle kind of colorations, that I had to play around with the colors just a little bit on the body of this dog and the fur of it to try to get that look right. So I did reference more than one of the photos of this dog to try to get the coloration correct, and I do make a couple of passes here trying to get the colors in that fur correct. So I put some color in here that's got a little bit more on the golden side, a little bit more yellow to it, and then checked out some other photos of it and said, there's a little bit more brown and red coming through in there. So I go back and adjust that a few times before I get to a point where I'm pretty happy with the color of that fur that you see coming through on this particular greyhound. Once I get my colors correct, then it's just a matter of going in with smaller brushes and detailing some things out. So right now I'm still working with my larger brushes, trying to get the colors shaded in where they need to be, working in larger areas. Once my paint dries in the areas that I've put it in, I have a better idea of what my end result color is going to be, so that I can go back and work in other areas. Now I'm going back and adjusting some of those colors along the edges again, and I'm using my liner brush here to put in individual details now of highlights above a lot of that color that I've already laid down. Working in so many different layers here, going back and forth and adjusting colors, it just makes the end result, when you look at it up close, a lot more interesting, because there's so much different variety of color and shading going on in there. It just looks like a very complex image, which a dog in real life, their fur and hair and colors under the lights would be the same way. There would be a lot of different variations going on in there. So the more you go back and forth on this, the more realistic it looks at in the end. So I'm kind of at that point in the process now where a lot of the major groundwork has been put in, and it's time to do some of the fine detailing work. So I'm still working closely with my source photo back there for reference, and a lot of this is getting details here in the face, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the fur lines and everything along the head here. So that's really what it's all about, is fine-tuning it and detailing it out till I get to a finished product. The last bit of detailing on these dogs is always kind of my favorite part, because it's really when the character of the painting comes together and you start to see the finished product. So the last bit of detailing that I always do is kind of a thing where you have to just tell yourself to stop at some point and call it finished product, and quit monkeying around with little fine-tuning details here and there, else you'll never finish. But it's always my favorite part of watching these paintings come to life in the end, and seeing the finished product come together as I finish out that detailing. It's always my favorite part. And so here's another quick look at the finished products here. There is Piper, the golden retriever there. This one is Murphy, one of the greyhounds. And then there is Guinness, the other greyhound, along with the source images I was working from there. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching my process of painting some dog portraits. Until next time, happy painting, everybody.